Cool. Um, I'll try my best to monitor the chat as well, but we'll get started. It's about 2:05 here on the East Coast. Thank you all for joining. This is just a little survey for attendance. If you can do the QR code, though, I'll try my best to get a list of participants just to get a sense. I think for us, we've done these webinars really starting around COVID, the original sort of COVID year back in 2020, and we've kept this going as sort of our fall webinar to augment our in-person spring meeting, though we had an in-person AAP meeting led by Chris Pruitt, Kemi, and others. So for those who don't know me, I'm Paul Aronson. I'm the current chair of PEM CRC. Thank you all for joining. This one is a little more sort of a lot of sort of hits and highlights, I will say, in that we go through sort of a little bit about what the network is, as well as some updates from various studies that are going on. Less of sort of an open discussion, which is very much the focus of the AAP a meeting for those who were able to attend. So we'll go ahead and go through. So this is our agenda today. I have some sort of gratitude up front. Son McLaren, who co-chairs our survey subcommittee, will present on sort of updates on the survey process. She and Dan Shapiro, who's the other co-chair, have done really amazing work in sort of advancing the survey process and a mechanism. We have a couple studies that are sort of closing out, essentially doing they're in the analysis and publication phase. We have several studies in progress. We're going to talk briefly about the two Graff studies that were awarded in the past year plus. And then we're also going to talk about the Aris Garro Research Prize, very, very recently awarded, or about to be awarded now. Chris Pruitt will lead that. Updates from PERN, thanks to Kemi, and then brief updates from the AAP NCE. Again, I'm recording this, and anyone has any questions about PEM CRC, if you feel free to email any of us who are on the executive committee. Just a quick sort of overview for, I think most of you are participating in PEM CRC in various ways for many years, probably some of you longer than I certainly have. So the PEM CRC, the goal really, or mission, is to provide a framework for multi-center investigation, helping to support and facilitate the development and execution of impactful, rigorous collaborative research in our field, and also to help support the development of the next generation of pediatric emergency medicine researchers. We really encourage involvement from fellows and junior faculty in particular. As of right now, we have 4 ongoing projects, 1 project that has just started, and then we have 1 new Ken Graff awardee each year. Which is great. We have 76 sites that have signed on to participate in, it'll be available. Not that everyone has participated in every study, but they have expressed interest in participating in PEM CRC studies, which I think is the largest number of sites sort of globally we've had. And that includes 3 different countries. And each has a designated site champion who serves to sort of get the study recruitment out to people in their section, as well as helping with survey response rate. So in terms of the executive or PEM CRC steering committee, executive committee, this is us. We've had a little bit of turnover in the past a year or two. Several folks joined last year, and we have some new members this year, including 3 new fellow reps at the bottom, Victor, Mayuri, and Emily, who joined Michael, Sarah, and Catherine, who did a great job of recruiting new fellows. Ken Michelson is taking over as the Ken Graff chair from Lynn Babcock. Lynn did amazing work these past several years on that. And Michael Gardner is also a newest member who's taking over the website from Amy Thompson. And so major gratitude to all those on the PEM CRC steering committee, put in a lot of work to make the network run. Just some mention of the website. This is the URL. You can easily find it. Amy Thompson has done really amazing work in building this up over the past couple years. Amy's decided to transition off the committee very recently, and Michael is gratefully to us taking over the website. Thank you to our 2 fellow reps who graduated, who are now faculty, and Tamara and Amanda. Also to Lynn and Amy again for their years of service for the PEM CRC. Also, thank you to all the site champions. Sorry, we had 75. I think I said 76 earlier, so it's 75, but all from the US, Canada, and Spain. Thank you to the site champions, each who again do work to help recruit sites for studies, help encourage survey responses, and it's great. If anyone has any questions about site champions, each site, all of you on this have a site champion. You probably know who that person is. Many of you on the call are probably site champions yourselves. So we'll do a survey update. I'll advance the slides for any of the speakers, but I'll turn it over to Sun McLaren, who's presenting on behalf of her and Dan. And again, Sun and Dan have really done a great job of really advancing this survey process, which is really an important part of PEM CRC.
Thanks, Paul, for the introduction, and thanks everyone for joining. We can go to the next slide. So our committee reviews survey proposals throughout the year on a rolling basis, and we accept proposals based on a set of criteria, which is posted on the submission website, but you can also see here to really dedicated to looking at the relevance, rigor, and the scholarly impact of the proposals. To decrease the burden on the members who have opted in to complete the surveys, we distribute a maximum of one survey per a 3-month period. And we can go to the next slide. On the left is the QR code to join the survey listserv. So if you're interested in taking the surveys that are approved by the PEM CRC committee, you can scan that code to join. It's also available on the website. And on the right, we have the QR code for submitting a new survey application. I do have to add that we've had a very large number of submissions recently, which is wonderful. But to ensure that those surveys can be reviewed and the accepted surveys distributed within a reasonable amount of time after review, we are actually pausing acceptance of new survey applications until probably about January. And as soon as we are able to reopen that, we will update the website and let you know. If you're curious about where that kind of is in terms of timing, feel free to reach out to me or to Dan. We can go to the next slide. Currently, we have 730 members in the listserv, and a list of those emails without any other identifying information are sent to the survey winners to be used for the distribution of the surveys only. And then we can go to the next slide. And these are some of the publications that have come out of the PEM CRC over the past 5 years, and there are many more. And so we've had a really good track record of publications coming out of surveys that have been submitted by everyone from fellows all the way to established faculty and researchers. You can go to the next slide. So this is our contact information, both for Dan and me. Again, they're posted on the website if you need to reach us about any questions, or if you are struggling through, where to find what item, always don't hesitate to reach out. And then our final slide is just to say thank you to all of the committee members who review the survey and give us wonderful input. That's all I have.
Thanks so much, Sun. I just want to add just a couple things for context too. So, because often I get not infrequently emails about distributing surveys, because we recognize as Dan and Sun have actually increased our usually it was like just under 500, now up to 730 people who've opted in, which is great. And you can see from a lot of the surveys that were published that it was a little dip during the sort of the COVID sort of time period, like we were in the 30%, but since some of the work they've done, it's really now in the high 40s and may even be higher going forward. So, and that, obviously the higher response rate, probably better for both the data, but also better for getting it published. And also this is really meant to be a rigorous process, because we want these surveys to, as Sun said, to be impactful, to lead to future study. And so that's why we have this process in place. We do get not infrequently questions about, can I distribute this survey through Site Champions or through the PEM CRC listserv. And while we certainly want to be inclusive and support people's research, we by all means keep asking these questions, but we tend to be have this process for a reason, to really limit sort of survey fatigue, to make sure the surveys going through are not in conflict with other surveys. So that's why we have this process. Any questions about that, feel free to email me, feel free to email Dan and Sun. But just we do try to control it, kind of like Sue Tellez has done an amazing job with the AAP SOEM listserv to make sure we're not getting like a ton of emails. She really restricts it. It's a really important distribution, and we kind of have the same idea with sort of surveys. We want to be inclusive. Any questions about it? Sometimes we've had creative ways for distributing surveys in other ways that maybe the PEM CRC listserv is not the optimal mechanism. And then the last thing I'll mention too is there's been questions about coordinating surveys across a network, which Sun and Dan are actively working on sort of a policy for that as well. So again, Sun and Dan put a ton of time, and Chris Pruitt before them into these, and I want to just give a shout out because it's not a small amount of work. So thank you to Sun and Dan, and also to Chris Pruitt, who did a lot of this work before as well. Um, Cool. So now we're going to go on to some of the PEM CRC studies. I know there are some authors, or some, sorry, project leaders slash lead authors who are on the call. If you're not on the call, I'll just present some of the slides. This is meant to just provide an update. We're very fortunate. We have, as I mentioned, really now five, four ongoing studies, a couple that are closing out, and then another study that just recently started up. So this is great. We want sort of these studies to keep happening and to to put out impactful publications. So Jen Hoffman is not able to make it today because of I think a research symposium at Lurie, but she provided these slides as an update. And Jen's done a great job in leading this PEM CRC study on diagnostic testing and psychosis with her mentor Todd Florin. So again, some of the aims, many of you participate in this study, but determine the diagnostic yield of neuroimaging performed among youth presenting to the ED for psychosis, identify clinical characteristics of those with psychosis that are associated with the absence of clinically significant neuroimaging findings, and ultimately thinking about determining the diagnostic yield of laboratory testing performed amongst these youth with psychosis who have neuroimaging performed. Really thinking about sort of, I think, overuse and can we better target some of the lab testing and neuroimaging to these patients with psychosis. So under Jen's leadership, the primary manuscript was published, I think, recently, actually, in Academic Emergency Medicine. And these are some of the results here. So about 5% of the cohort had a clinically significant neuroimaging findings. Substance and alcohol use were associated with a lower odds of finding a significant neuroimaging findings. And then they did a subgroup analysis as well, which you can present here. And again, the point being, I think there's probably a population of patients that Jen and her team and all those who participate have identified that probably don't necessarily need neuroimaging and really targeting neuroimaging to quote higher risk patients. And lastly, they have a brief report on significant lab findings, sort of the AIM 3 that was I mentioned that is currently in progress, and I think is going to be submitted in the near future. So again, great work for Jen and all those who participate in the study. These are all the site PIs. Jen wanted to give a shout out to all those across these various sites. All right, I know Tim's on PEM CRC anaphylaxis study. I just have one slide on it. I'll let Tim. I don't know, Tim, if you want to just share the update, or I can. I mean, it's your baby, and you've done amazing work on this study.
No, thank you for the whole group. Yeah, the first paper was published here. Hopefully, it will help inform and reduce observation periods. And then our second study is trying to figure out a group of patients who maybe never need to come to the emergency department who receive epi before coming into the ED, which is a new recommendation from the U.S. practice parameter. So hopefully, it'll be another manuscript to inform care. And then we'll have a few more studies after that. So it's a large database.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and Tim, I quote your study not infrequently when I have patients with anaphylaxis in the ED. So you got a lot of citations verbally at Yale. So awesome work leading this impactful study. I don't think that Ram is on. I think he's at the symposium. But Ram is currently still leads the epidemiology biomarkers and risk stratification of young infants presenting to the ED with hypothermia. So the hypothermia study with the or RISHI is the nice acronym with the mentors listed here. So these are the aims. This is going to go on for really 2+ years now. So with aim 1 being to describe the epidemiology and prevalence of serious bacterial infections and HSV among young infants in the first 9 days of life who present to the ED with hypothermia. Aim 2 is to evaluate the role of biomarkers in predicting serious bacterial infection amongst these young infants with hypothermia. And lastly, aim 3 is to derive and internally validate a prediction rule for serious bacterial infections amongst young infants presented to the ED with hypothermia. So just sort of in terms of what the study is, so they're kind of in sort of the year 2 to year 3 phase right now, which they started off with automated data extraction, which was a pretty hefty data lift. They provided a data query to sites. And so almost all the sites have completed that automated data extraction. And now sites are working on manual data extraction for the really sort of for aim 3 in particular. And the study had a bunch of abstracts presented at PAS this past year. So in terms of the overall sort of overview, 27 sites are participating, and that includes ROM's institution, IRB approval DOAs all set up, and currently they have data uploaded from 26 of the 27 sites with 70,000 plus records. That's from the automated data extraction. These are the sites listed here, and a shout out to all the site investigators who put in a lot of time and work on this study, and obviously to Ram and his primary team as well in leading the study. So abstracts were presented, I mentioned, PAS earlier this year, and Ram, in addition to manual data extraction, to be able to derive this prediction rule using a case control design, Ram is working on some of the primary manuscripts as well, which hopefully will be written and shared amongst the group very soon. So great job to Ram and his team. I'll turn it over to Kelly Bergman to talk about an update on the DKA study.
Yeah, thanks. I also cite the anaphylaxis article pretty regularly lately, so I echo that. You can move on to the next slide. So just to refresh everybody, the aim of this study is to determine whether race and ethnicity are associated with DKA-related acute kidney injury and certain health outcomes, and then secondarily to try to identify factors for kids that have sustained AKI. Most kids come in with AKI and it resolves within 24 hours, but there's a small group that have development of AKI or have ongoing sustained AKI in the hospital. So we're trying to identify those factors, and this is how we define that. Next slide. Okay, so we have recruited a lot of sites, a lot of DUAs, a lot of IRBs. We have 18 sites that have access to the REDCap database, and we have 12 sites that have uploaded data so far. So that 2,522 is actually up to 4,400 something right now across 12 sites. So that's going to inform some of our preliminary analysis. There's going to be some exclusions that we're doing on the back end there. So I think that's probably going to be brought down to just above 3,000, maybe 3,500 or so, which that is about what we need for our power analysis for our sample size. So even with the other sites that are going to be contributing data, we're already knocking it out of the park, I feel like. Next slide. So these are some of the sites that still have their IRBs and DUAs in process that have still indicated interest in participating. And so I think once we start to get more data and work through the data cleaning process on our end as a first pass, then we're going to start to reach out to some of these sites here and gauge interest and make sure that we're still including them and keeping things open. Next slide. So just two things. There's an encounter exclusion form that some of you are aware of. So here we want to get a sense of who is being excluded from your cohort on the front end. And so there's three really exclusion criteria, and that's going to generate your list of your total number of encounters. From there, you send that number to myself and our coordinator along with this form, and then you can go to the next slide. From there, we generate 20 random encounters to do inter-rater reliability on 5 key variables. And we review that, our statistician goes over it. We've only had to troubleshoot one brief issue with one site, and that went pretty smoothly. So that's our process for that. So we'll get your encounter exclusion form, generate random list of 20 encounters. You'll send us your inter-rater review, and then you'll be good for data entry. So 18 sites have completed that process so far and have access to the REDCap database in Baylor. Okay, so I have 5 abstracts planned for PAS. And so for the sites that have started to contribute data and into the REDCap database, I've been in contact with you over the last 1 or 2 weeks, and I've sent you some preliminary abstracts, including skeleton tables and things like that. So I know Natalie Tedford in the University of Wisconsin has interest in leading an abstract looking at comparing different social vulnerability indexes, so COI, SVI, ADI, and how that is associated with race and ethnicity and readmissions for DKA. Rupa at Children's Hospital in Michigan expressed interest in looking at early administration of Lantus and how that impacts hospital length of stay. There's some single center studies looking at that, but certainly nothing as robust as the data set we have. And then I'm looking for somebody to take the lead on comparing different GFR estimates. Currently, when all the literature around AKI is looking at the Schwartz estimating equation to determine AKI status, but there are other equations out there, CKID U25 and other European equations that may be better. So I'm looking for somebody to maybe take the lead on that. Otherwise, I'll do it, and then I'll present the two primary, the primary and secondary aim as abstracts as well. So I think that's it.
Yeah, I just to highlight and thank you, Kelly. Great job leading this huge endeavor. So you see from a bunch of these PEM CRC studies, there's of course the main project that was approved, often with several aims. And I think Kelly's study, Ram's study, Jen's, Tim's, all sort of have highly impactful sort of research as the primary aim. Then often there's a rich data set that's collected that can be used to answer other questions. I know Ram, for example, had several abstracts at the last PS. Kelly's planning the same. As Tim mentioned, he has several studies that are be coming out of his anaphylaxis data set. And that's sort of a PEM CRC theme. And I think also that those folks who are leading it, and Kelly and Ram have done this too, with the abstracts, is getting other sites involved who want to help like lead a certain part of that. And so I think that's a great sort of use of networking, goes with our mission to do both impactful research, but also try to elevate other investigators and help in their career. So we appreciate that sort of sharing of responsibility and sharing of productivity as well. So we'll talk about Ken Graff now. And I don't know if Sophia is able to make it. I think she might have a clinical or research conflict.
Yeah.
Oh, you're here, Sophia?
Hi.
Oh, excellent. Sophia's here. Great. So this is our Ken Graff 40 from last year. Sophia, who we're very fortunate to have at Yale. So Sophia, I'll advance your slides. I'll turn it over to you just to give a little update on your Ken Graff project.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks. You can move on to the next slide. So our goal was to partner with pediatric champions in community EDs to co-develop and optimize a pediatric resuscitation training intervention and then maximize engagement and usability. So for the first aim, we co-designed the intervention for pediatric cardiac arrest. And then for aim 2, we partnered with PECs to increase usability and engagement. You can move on to the next slide. And then we enrolled 4 sites across the country, 2 in Connecticut, 1 in Texas, 1 close to Seattle. And with each of these sites, we worked on essentially refining this intervention. So we ran each version of the cardiac arrest simulation, and then based on the feedback that each site provided, we provided them with an updated version of the resource, and so on, almost like small PDSA cycles. And we completed 4 sites of simulations, and hopefully now we have a version of the resuscitation intervention that is more tailored to a general ER setting. Next slide. That's what the resource looks like. I think many or some of you might be familiar with Symbox. It's more next or a little bit more of an updated version of that, and it provides information about what's happening with the patient. There's a cardiac monitor, but there's also the option to monitor the team's performance by measuring time to epinephrine administration, time that the team was doing chest compressions versus not. So some team performance data that we are able to track with each site over time and then kind of monitor team performance over time. I think that's all. Is there another slide? Yeah, that's all.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thanks so much, Sophia. And Sophia was awarded the Ken Graff in her last year fellowship, and now is faculty with us doing awesome research. So congrats, Sophia. I will say I know Caleb is on the call too. Caleb, I didn't have you update the slides because from the Ken Graff awardee 2 years ago or in 2023, but Caleb obviously completed his Ken Graff project. So instead, was going to have our sort of most recent Ken Graff awardee. Gina from Baylor present on her research, which is, I say, very exciting, sort of a unique in that it's sort of more laboratory based, which we don't have a ton of laboratory based research in PEM. So we're very excited to have Gina be awarded the Ken Graff Award, and we'd love to hear an update. I think Gina, I think I saw you on the
I'm
call.
here, yeah. Can you hear
Awesome.
me?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'm really excited to tell you about my project, the infection and nasal organoids. You can go to the next slide. So my overlying research question was kind of looking at why some kids get so sick with RSV while others really only have mild infection. And that was really born out of trying to figure out who we need to be super careful of in the ED and who we can discharge home safely. And just to remind everyone, it's still the #1 cause of hospitalization in babies. Next. But we really don't have any markers for who's going to develop severe RSV other than looking at like size and gestational age, but there's really no biomarkers. Next, please. So I work in a lab that we have this really cool mechanism where we can basically make an organ in a dish. So doing a mid-turbinate swab, so a little bit deeper than a nasal swab with a little wash, we can isolate stem cells. We can grow out these 3-dimensional organoid structures, and they have all of the cell types that we see in the lung. They have the ciliated cells. You can see like the little wavy things there, and they have all the different types. What's really cool is that one organoid has the genetic diversity of the patient from which it's derived. Next. So my project centers around taking those same organoids from kids with mild RSV and severe RSV and looking at, first of all, when we reinfect with RSV infection, what does the virus look like? How do the viral kinetics work? Who has the highest viral levels? What do the cytokines look like? Also, at the same time, I want to look at the histopathology and look at like cell damage and see if we can look at a model system that represents what we see clinically. I also want to look at establishing this model system to test antivirals, and hopefully in the future that will lead to drug development and biomarkers for severe disease. I think that's it.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks so much, Gina. We look forward to hearing updates at next AAP and this webinar. Thanks so much. Congratulations. All right, so I have the Ken Graff Award process. I don't know, Lynn, I saw you on. Do you want me to talk through it, or do you want to talk through? I know Lynn's done, I can't say enough, Lynn's done a really fantastic job of organizing the Ken Graff Award process and really making this sort of a sustainable process for Ken, who's taking this over. But Lynn, do you want to talk about the timeline, or do you want me to go ahead and do it?
Hey, Paul, Lynn just texted me. She had to jump off for some PERN meetings.
Okay, then I'll go ahead and do it. Awesome. So Ken Graff Award, which is a longstanding, AAP SOEM award, has been incorporated into PEM CRC for the past 5 years or so. Lynn was the Ken Graff chair, and now transitioned over to Ken Mickelson, as I mentioned. The way it works is submit a 2-page concept. There's a call for proposals, and I'll show you the timeline in just a moment. And then of all the calls for proposals, a couple, usually around 2 or so, are invited for a full proposal, and then they're reviewed by the PEM CRC Executive Committee for several criteria: importance for PEM, the methodology, the analytic plan, and of course feasibility and budget as well. And then ultimately we make a decision, and then one Ken Graff Award is awarded each year. Often, announced and given out at the AAP NCE. So this is the timeline for 2025, 2026. So the plan is to announce the sort of call for concepts or 2-page pre-proposals will come out in December, with the pre-proposals due on February 19th. Then about a month after that, so in sort of mid-March, March 16th, the investigators of those pre-proposals who are selected to submit full proposals will be notified, with a deadline then about a month and a half after that, at the end of April. And then the winner will be announced at the end of May, planned around May 29th. And then the award period is typically for 1 year. So in this case, it will be July 1st, 2026 to June 30th, 2027, with then the award being officially bestowed at the fall AAP NCE meeting, which will be in next October. And then there's different time periods for submitting progress reports in the AAP financial report for the budget. So that's the timeline. Any questions about Ken Graff, you can email myself. I can also obviously turn over to Lynn and to Ken, who run this process. So I'm going to turn over to Chris in terms of talking about the 2025 Aris Garro Research Prize.
Great. Thanks, Paul. It's great to see everybody. So, second prize, the convey MCRC is the Garro Research Prize. This is given annually to either a fellow or typically a junior faculty member. And if you're wondering what might be the difference between the Graff, there's not necessarily monies attached to the Garro Award. However, it's more of a traditional PEM CRC type study that we're looking for. So you get access to the network, to our data center, which Dr. and Andrea at Texas Children's have helped a lot with, which is just a really huge benefit to the awardee. So a lot of the bigger studies that you see get published have been part of our research prize. So we had a very competitive process for selecting the 2025 prize. And Paul, if you want to advance the slide. So today we're going to announce that the Garro Prize winner for 2025 is Vanessa Thomas and her team at UCSD and Rady. And their study is exciting as risk factors for AKI yet again, but this time in the context of children with rhabdomyolysis. So we're very excited about this study. We'll be working closely with Vanessa and her team to figure out sites that can participate, get together their materials and everything like that. So last thing I'll say, for those of you who are at sites, be sure to be in touch with your PEM CRC site champions to make sure that you're getting all communications around this. If you happen to be on the call and you're not a site that's necessarily contributing or participating, just feel free to reach out to me, Paul, or whomever, and we'll see if you might be a candidate for the study. But congratulations to Vanessa and her team.
And thanks so much, Chris, for organizing, the Aris Garro Research Prize, process. Congratulations to Vanessa and her team. Also, Colleen Gutman is working with Chris now on this Aris Garro Research Prize and protocol process. As Chris mentioned up front, just always have to just acknowledge. So, for those who don't know, many of you do, but many of you did know Aris Garro, who was a really great guy and family man, in addition to being a great PEM provider and researcher who did a lot of work with PEM CRC, PCAR, other research networks, who passed away a few years ago. And so this prize is in honor of him and his family. And so just always want to acknowledge that Aris was a good friend to many on this call, in addition to being a talented researcher and clinician. So I don't know if Caitlin's on. So I put Caitlin Crumb's study here, since Caitlin was the awardee from the Aris Garro Research Prize last year for her study. Caitlin, are you on? If not, I can talk through her study. So this was, again, last year's Aris Garro Research Prize winner that Caitlin is leading from Seattle Children's. It's the CRASHI study, so creation of a rule for acquiring a skeletal survey in a head injury. So the sort of fundamental question is really, when is a skeletal survey useful to obtain in cases of pediatric head injury? Thinking about, can we sort of differentiate? Are we overusing skeletal surveys? Are we underusing skeletal surveys? And can we better target skeletal surveys to those with a higher risk of abusive head injury? So the aims are to derive a clinical decision rule to predict when skeletal survey will identify non-skull fractures in children less than 24 months of age who present with non-occult skull fracture and/or intracranial injury from a large multi-center ED head injury population. So when decision rule to help use of skeletal survey to identify other injuries, and ultimately to describe the prevalence of occult non-skull fractures on skeletal survey. So the idea being that we know they have a skull fracture already, but to identify other injuries. So the progress of the site today, and Caitlin's doing a great job running this study. So 47 sites expressed interest in participating. Already, 37 sites have IRB approval, and 11 sites have IRB and DUA approved together, and 3 sites have already completed a preliminary data pull as well. These are the participating sites. I think the sites who are highlighted here are the sites that have both IRB and DUA approved together, which is not an insignificant amount of work. So thank you to all the sites who are participating in this and to Kaylin and her team for running this study. So I'll turn over to Kemi to give some updates on PERN.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Paul. You can go to the next slide. So as you all know, PERN is the Pediatric Emergency Research Network of networks with participants and networks from across the globe, including PREDICT, PERC in Canada, REDEPLA in Latin America, PECARN, PEM CRC, etc. And this is just, this slide is highlighting, number one, that we try and touch base as a group at many in-person meetings. So this was many of the national meetings, like this was at PAS for the people that were there, PAS in Hawaii. And then also this slide is highlighting that we have an updated website, which, you know what, I didn't put the URL in there, but if you just Google PERN emergency medicine, this is the site that would come up. Next slide, please. And then going to highlight a few of the publications that have come out over the last year, actually, since our last meeting. And we can just scroll relatively quickly through them. So this was one, yes, this one was looking at COVID and co-infections. Next slide, please. This is another one for looking at asthma scores across different sites and across the different guidelines that are available all over the world. Next slide. This was Todd's paper on pneumonia and predicting pneumonia severity in the emergency departments, which was a major study that had been going on for the past 4 or 5 years or so. So just published in the Lancet, which is great. Next, please. Another one just published in JAMA with looking specifically at opioid administration for intussusception. Next. And I think this was another more recent one from Jim, actually just published this month, looking at data availability across, because this is an international network, right? And so what data are actually available at the different sites? And it was really interesting to see what basic factors could be collected at all sites. So I think that's it for published studies in the past year. And now looking at ongoing enrolling studies, we have 2 major ones still ongoing at the moment. Prompt Bolus, which many of you are a part of. It's a randomized controlled trial. This one is a really interesting study for PERN because it is a funded randomized controlled trial that is going on now at multiple sites, so 45 sites. They are almost done, I believe, with enrollment. I don't think Fran or Nate are on the call to give updates, but basically practically done with enrollment. The target was December this year. And then it would just be data analysis and cleaning, and we can give further updates at next meetings. And then there's the asthma study going on with, oh, enrollment ends on the 31st. Okay, great. Thank you, Ronnie. And then these are all the other studies that are going through data analysis at the moment. Enrollment has ended for them. The primary paper for the pneumonia study was the Lancet study I was just pointing out, but there are other manuscripts being in development. The COVID-19 study is complete with multiple manuscripts being published, including 2 that I just highlighted in this meeting. And then Metatron is an evaluation of a large language model for medicine specifically. And there was a PERN evaluation that was completed, and the manuscript is in preparation for that one as well. And then the BIPED study, which is also in the manuscript or data analysis and manuscript stage. Next slide, please. This slide is just to highlight that PERN continues to expand, and the most recent network that joined is the Israel Pediatric Emergency Research Network that just joined a few months ago. And next slide, it just it highlights the growing number of sites that we have now in PERN, because IcePERN, I believe, includes 11 sites, and so that adds another 11 sites to the multiple PERN sites across the world. Next. This slide was just to highlight that even if you are not part of one of the research networks that were highlighted before, like PEM CRC, PCARN, or PERN or PERC, there is a pathway for independent hospitals to be parts of research studies going on through the network. So quite a few hospitals are involved, for instance, in sub-Saharan Africa in a PERN study that are not part of a specific network. And so just wanted to highlight that that is a feasible or possibility. Next. And last, I think, was just to say there are multiple activities going on in PERN, including podcasts that Todd Chang hosts for that interview PIs for the different studies and have other topics as well. You can also find this on the PERN website. Next, and I think that's it. Any questions?
Thanks so much, Kemi. It's just amazing, this collaboration across the globe that is, as you highlighted, leading to such impactful research with so many sites engaged across the globe that continues to expand, which is amazing. And just, as we said, we're very inclusive in PEM CRC. I mentioned we have 75 sites. If there's someone who's on the call who's not a site, like we are always accepting sites. It's really, the criteria for PEM CRC is really just that it's almost like a study by study basis, meaning that you have the data capabilities, the IRB, the DOA capabilities for particular studies, which most academic centers, would have. Some studies have very restrictive, complex populations, and maybe there aren't enough. Though the recent small bowel, the shortcut study that was led by Joel Hudgens and Lise Nigovich, had to have, do like sort of pre-work to see if sites had enough of those type of patients, because not every site is a referral center. But for the most part, many PEM CRC sites, your site is eligible. So I think probably everyone on the call site is a member, but if you're not or you're not sure, just feel free to email us. So last thing I'll just mention is Chris and others, Chris, Kemi, others hosted a sort of more informal sort of PEM CRC 101 meeting at AAP NCE. And there were, sounds like it was a great discussion, and there were several sort of ideas that were generated. This is not meant today to be an open forum, but more just sort of like almost a preview of things that we will be discussing sort of going forward. So one, this has already started, and is a data science Epic Cosmos sort of subcommittee, where there's obviously a lot of work. Many investigators and different research groups have looked at FIS, at sort of other sort of administrative database researches. Epic Cosmos is sort of, many of our sites are part of Epic Cosmos. And so technically we have the ability then to sort of pull data from it. Obviously you have to have very specific expertise and access to do it. And there are a few people who have it, many of us don't. But the idea being that this is obviously a huge, rich data source that we could think about leveraging, especially sort of across the network. And given that PEM CRC is sort of the research hub of the AAP section on emergency medicine, the thought was to have a sort of a new subcommittee sort of as part of PEM CRC. Still in the works. There's a recent email setting up out to a bunch of investigators who have sort of data science expertise or expertise with Cosmos itself. And so that's sort of an in-process thing, but we're something that will sort of coming down the pike, basically, was to sort of incorporate this into the PEM CRC as sort of a home for this subcommittee with expertise. There's an idea talking about thinking about pragmatic trials using EHR data. So obviously PEM CRC primarily, not all, the RSV study from a couple of decades ago being an example of a prospective study, but for the most part, PEM CRC studies are retrospective, sort of leveraging EHR data, whether it's automated data pulls, manual data abstraction. But there's a question of whether are there sort of trials that can be done? This was an idea brought up in the meeting that merits further discussion using EHR data. So something just thinking about how can we leverage the network to continue to sort of promote pediatric emergency medicine research. There's an idea thinking about PEM CRC workshops and using AI for research. And there's some folks in PEM CRC and sort of in the sort of in our field in general who have expertise in this. I am not one of those folks, but there are people who have expertise. That's another idea. And then another idea was thinking about, can we better disseminate PEM CRC? So we have the great website that Amy, has helped to really build up, and that Michael Gardner just, now is sort of enhancing after taking over for Amy, but there are ways to sort of better disseminate, whether through videos. I am not on social media, but for those on social media, through social media, there are other ways to sort of disseminate the sort of work that's being done at PEM CRC to really sort of get out there. And I'll use like the recent study, like Tim's anaphylaxis study, which many of us have been talking about, thinking about that could be it really is a practice-changing type of study, and is there a better way to disseminate this type of work in addition to sort of what's already being done through like local institutions, press releases, etc. But can we do something on the PEM CRC side? So and nothing sort of imminent, but these are some of the things that were brought up and great ideas that we have monthly PEM CRC steering committee meetings that we'll be discussing some of these ideas in addition to over email. So that's all I have. We don't yet have a date for when our meeting will be at PAS, but we will have an in-person meeting at PAS, which will be sort of probably a hybrid type of meeting, similar meaning that not that the Zoom options have become increasingly limited at these meetings because of the cost and availability. But what I mean by that is both update on studies, kind of like what we've done today, but also I think using the framework that Chris and Kemi and some of our fellow reps and others did in leading the AAP meeting to have this sort of more open discussion. And I think that's also a good use of people's time, in addition to hopefully bringing back some social events as well to promote sort of collaboration, especially getting our fellows, junior faculty, others who may not participate in PEM CRT to meet and come to these meetings and get involved. So that's all I had. It's 2:50 on Eastern time. So any comments, questions anyone wanted to bring up? I want to be sensitive to everyone's time and busy schedules, but any questions or any comments people wanted to make? So I do see one question in the chat about how investigators use the PEM CRC studies to obtain grant funding. It's a great question. So I'm going to answer that in two ways. Happy to have anyone else jump in as well. So one is, of course, there's like you've done the PEM CRC study, and that's now preliminary data for a grant. So that's certainly been used before. I think Christian Polcini, who I think got the Ken Graff a few years ago, but he did a study, and others have used it for like preliminary data for a grant. Then there's the idea that we want to propose a study using the PEM CRC and then get funding for that study. And Ram, who is leading the hypothermia study, is the most recent example of that, where Ram applied to the Gerber Foundation for a research award at the same time that he was awarded by the research prize to be able to do his study. And so the way that works is similar. I think we sort of have a mechanism for this, obviously not quite as formal as like the PERN process, but where executive committee will certainly review a proposal. And obviously we have to sort of approve a proposal for the network, number one. But number two is we do provide letters of support for grant applications as well. What Ron did and what others have done and a few times has come up is not getting a letter from every site, but more sort of a letter that explains what the PEM CRC is. We have 75 sites. On average, about 30 sites participate per study. We vet every site, so it's all basically making it all to show feasibility, basically. A study does not necessarily have to 100% be approved through the PEM CRC to support a grant application, because we recognize that sometimes the grant is needed to do the study. So we are happy to discuss with people sort of the timing and how that would work. Obviously, we want to sort of review to see if it's something that would be feasible for PEM CRC, but we definitely want to support grant applications. And I have a template for a letter. I've written a couple of them now to help support that. And so just email me, email Chris, if you have any questions about that. But there's definitely a mechanism for having the PEM CRC provide a letter of support to help with grant funding. And ROMS was successful through the Gerber Foundation, which the nice part about that, it helped, a little funding for like centrally statistician, et cetera, but also a small amount of funding per each site to help with data pull, et cetera. And there was a pretty heavy data lift. So I think that was helpful. With no other questions or anything, I want to thank everyone for joining today. And again, thanks to everyone on the PEM CRC steering committee, those who used to be on the steering committee who did sort of so much work setting up this network, and all the site champions and everyone who participates in PEM CRC. We know it's a lot of these studies are certainly a labor of love. I think I've been fortunate to be part of several PEM CRC studies that have really helped produce impactful research, and it's all the people who sort of make this network go. So thank you all. Email any of us with questions or comments, and thanks again for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.